very good. Me.
The classic description, normally 70 to 80% apply to you.
Sure.
And then you say, in all truth, I'm not that way. Yeah. But there will be enough overarching features.
You're right.
No, there's always, like almost all sevens are extroverts. One of my very best friends is a seven who's a quiet introvert, but nevertheless, a seven wants to be happy and do fun things all the time. I'm surprised that any of you are necessarily sevens. Usually sevens jump out. Yes,
Oh, it's not. Okay.
No,
I was just
going.
wondering. Okay.
Yeah, I just went in and got it. I didn't realize you were charging.
Yeah, so it's all good.
Nice
all
work
good.
with that Pulaski tool.
What's that?
That Pulaski tool.
So,
But do you know what you are, Charles? Two. No, your smile is very warm, and that's typical of the two. It's the nonverbals. It's the nonverbals that give you away. And a lot of twos become passive. You want to serve, you want to help. Nothing wrong with that.
Okay. So
The
one
Sufis
second,
thought
just send
Jesus
email
was
right
the
now,
two.
or you-
Yeah.
What's up in your mind? Call it.
Help or heal.
Okay, so M Collins, C-O-L-I-N, Moody, M-O-O-D-Y, at Gmail.
Whoops. And Colin.
Anybody flying out already in the afternoon tomorrow? Oh, yeah.
I-
Two? Yeah, you better get ready.
There's a shot tomorrow. I need to leave like 11:20 to get my bike back in time.
Oh.
I do that, but I'm thinking to get it and get to the airport.
We'll just report you to Fuller. Don't give him any credits. He was
I didn't think about how that would rental would affect my timing.
He's not a good student always.
Just skating through.
Listens.
He wouldn't remain in the moment.
He's already in the next one. Okay. Charles, okay, anything we'd like to look at? So, mention, process, criticize, admire. Did you fill some gaps, I hope? I'm glad you had a clear job this time. Transplanting kale, that was it? Kale. Like something you don't even eat that much. Yes?
I do a lot of gardening all summer long. I really miss it in the wintertime.
I do too.
It really does keep me in the present. My mind doesn't seem to wander. I'm just right there, and
I agree.
so it's a great spiritual experience. And I felt the same there in terms of just, of all the things we were doing. I just totally stopped thinking.
This, and I know there's a couple wannabe or would-be ones in the room. Almost all ones, and those who have a one-man we love nature and gardening because it feels like perfection. Anything growing. And we have are you a one too?
I have a one wing.
You think you're
I'm a three who was so deceptive that I think I thought I was a one for my entire life until like a month ago. I think you can be a one.
No kidding. We ones get very serene and happy in the presence of nature. Anything about God or infinity gives us a sense of having touched upon perfection. And I'm the same. That's what I did last night. As tired as I was, I worked in my garden, and it was just so. I couldn't be happy. I couldn't be happy. It's hard to read. So, anything else from the gardening moment? Or it doesn't have to be, but I just want to give you a chance.
It's hard for me to not go fast.
And so you're thinking you're a three now. Is that right?
I've just recently been rethinking it.
I'm thinking You might.
I scored really high in both, so I don't know.
1 and 3. Well, you're right. Both the 1 and the 3 are dynamo personality that we just want to keep moving. Keep moving. Keep moving. Yeah.
So it's hard for me to just not think of things as a task to get done. Whatever it is.
But just know what I know you do. That's what makes this kind of thing all the more important for you,
Yeah.
especially as you get older.
Yeah.
That you just won't be happy if you don't balance yourself out. And that's one of the things the Enneagram really helps you to do, to recognize where you need self-balancing. And your lack of self-balancing doesn't tend to bite you in the behind till the second half of life. First half of life, it all looks like virtue and wonderful. And I got through the seminary because I was a 1. I was on time, I was clean, I was reverent, little Boy Scout. That's what a 1 is, a little Boy Scout. And but then, when I had to be responsible for my own life and my own relationships, I realized those very virtues that people admire me for were actually the things that made me unhappy and irritable. And anything else? Do you think, since you're the first group we've done this with, I had planned on doing this with the Living School group. The other alternative, which we didn't offer you, all these ditches around here, they go for miles, and they have walkways on both sides of them. We were going to give you a plastic bag and just let you walk, throw trash in, clean up the ditches. We didn't offer you that because we had the impression they had an awful lot of work here. Apparently yesterday or Tuesday they didn't. But at any rate, do you think you would recommend that we do this with the Living School?
Yes.
Do you?
I did this first with you guys at the Wisdom School, Cynthia Bourgeois. Do you
Oh,
remember
Cynthia
this?
insists on it. Yeah.
And that was a few years ago, and I hated every second of it. I was like, what the hell are we doing?
Why?
Kind of reaction, and I was worried to get something accomplished.
Yes. I'm paying money for this. Yeah.
So my experience now, 3 years later, is so different.
Really?
Yeah.
That you feel you've changed, or
Yeah.
something changed.
Something changed. Like I wouldn't have minded doing this every day now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think for the Living School people, it'll be wonderful.
I think it's good. I noticed something that helped us. I think it's good. I like the integration with it's a vital part of the community. That
Yes.
food.
Yes.
Mark was a big help when we got there because I don't think Joseph's necessarily a natural delegator. And so
Probably not.
Mark kind of said, "What if half of us go here, half go here?" And that immediately sort of freed us to go to tasks. And so it helps.
A little more direction.
Yeah, like if there was a coordination with them at a time saying we're going to bring X people over, we need 4 jobs or 3 jobs, and because there was a lot of lag, like he kind of just wanted to talk to us and show us around, and that's a fine activity, but it's a different one. And then I noticed since most of us are ministers, we're all ministering to this guy, which is not the same as Zen chores. It's kind of like what we do every day at home.
The New Mexican Chicano, they are so humble around us. They've imbibed this inferiority that we're smarter than they are, you're their bosses, and they just don't know how to switch that. That might be a piece of it. And Joseph has got a servant's heart. He just wants to help, So he probably wouldn't know how to boss you, right? Yeah. But this is good advice for us. Yes, Joe.
I just want to make sure your microphone.
Oh, it isn't on. Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay. There we go.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah, he probably wouldn't know how to do that. No. But we. Maybe walk the acequias. Yeah.
There's a lot of garbage on those roads.
I know. Doesn't it break your heart? Kills me as a 1.
So it could be a really interesting activity. Get about 30 feet in an hour.
Yeah. And it would allow you very much to do it privately, quietly, if that would be your need. If you've been talking here, just to walk these ditches, you can go all directions on them. There's some very pretty spots along. I often walk them at night. Any other thoughts on the plus, minuses of doing it, not doing it?
I think it's wise to do. It's fun.
Because
I got a little metaphor for myself.
what?
There's these little plants. They look like you just pull them out. And then underneath it is like a log. This little trees. Yeah. And they're widely connected. So you see this little plant, and then it's actually this log that's about this long. And it just made me think. I'm interested in like this whatever superficial manifestation of I have anxiety or lust. There's something underneath it that's
Sure.
actually much more substantial.
Good, yes, than the thing itself.
I think it's necessary.
Do you?
Sitting and thinking and processing all day to be reminded that there's more glass to pick up, there's more things to dig up, there's never enough with your hands. Thank you so much. I think it is a very necessary, tangible truth to a very, if we're not careful, esoteric exercise.
We're lucky that it's so close. He wanted to actually take you to another garden today where there was more work to do. But we knew by the time you drove there, drove back, it would destroy the afternoon. So this business of 3 minutes to walk there just makes it so nice.
And I agree with Mark. I believe you have to watch it being worthy. I mean, that's not. If I'm wrong, that's the point. I mean, I love.
That's right.
With our minister's heart, we love to do. We're doing something that's part of a bigger thing. We're part of picking up trash, which Mark does regularly at home. There's just more trash. I mean, it's just it won't stop. So that's I believe that's part of the planting cabbages upside down is not for the finished product, but the process.
Well, we'll probably try it at least with the first groups, but ask for a little more clarity, direction, guidance on the other end. And maybe it's just a matter of asking for that more clearly and giving them, okay, you're their bosses for half an hour. Take it, do it, and maybe that'll be enough. Okay, now we didn't get to process our 2-packed morning, but if there's any place you'd like to lead that, or the 2 handouts I gave you, on my version of spiral dynamics and my translation of spiral dynamics into the guiding of the soul through stages of spiritual direction. Anything anyone would like to? Yes.
Curious, at what level you feel that you experience life most?
Me?
Yeah.
Where do I experience life? Well, certainly not facing my shadow. I'd have to say 7. I am much more than who I thought I was. That sense of enlargement and emancipation that you get in the presence of a sense of union with God, with reality. Yeah. But wouldn't most people say that? I would think so.
I mean, I experience you as living at a 7, 8.
On my better days, I certainly touch upon it. Yeah. That's right, yeah. But remember, on my halt days, I regress, just like all of us do. So I don't think they're permanent states. That would be deceitful to tell you that. Yeah. Any other thoughts on anything we tried to say there?
I'm not sure it's related exactly to what we hit upon. There's a question that I found myself asking related to kind of true self, false self. And a lot of the language that I hear is, it would talk this way, kind of, we start in God, we have that. I mean, it's
That's a good.
discovering who we already are.
We already are.
And yet, from my tradition, I'm so used to thinking and part of me still believes, and this is where I'd like you to just kind of maybe nuance this with me, that there's something that happens when I say yes to God or open my life to God, where there's an implantation. I mean, the language of the new birth, the
Gotcha.
conception,
Gotcha.
or like there's a seed that is
Gotcha.
implanted. All of these are biblical ways to describe this new life that starts flowing into me that is part of that awakening. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
Because it feels a little alien just to say, I already had it, but, as though I was just unconscious of it and it's already in me, because it feels like it's not in me, it's still
Sure.
Yeah, so.
We just got the ring. You didn't hear it. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, now, of course, you're not from the Reformed tradition, are you? No. But people who are trained in the Reformed tradition, they've just got to recognize they got a terrible anthropology. So when this comes at them, many times they're the ones who have the greatest resistance to it. Now, I don't know if evangelicals are children of Calvin and Knox and all that, but they did a lot of other things right, but their analysis of the human person was very negative. So here was the consensus that I guess Calvin didn't know about or whatever, but in the early church, but again stronger in the Eastern church, taking that phrase from Genesis, we were created in the image and likeness of God. Just reams were written on that. What does image mean? What does likeness mean? But it becomes the most concise, clear answer to your very good question. Image was the objective, implanted DNA. You were created in the image of God, is the consensus they came up with. The image is there, objectively, ontologically, metaphysically, philosophically, use whatever word you prefer. But likeness was the subjective appropriation of the objective gift. We, in the Western Church, which is much more, extroverted than the Eastern Church, I guess that'd be a word. We made this whole thing of likeness a real carrot on a stick thing. And that's what Luther was criticizing in the Catholic Church, and he was right. But he framed it in too naive a way, it seems to me, that we were all good works. Do good works and you will get your salvation. You will achieve your likeness. But what we really had done wrong is we neglected the whole theosis, divinization, objective presence of the Holy Spirit, the Christ mystery, that matter and spirit have been one since the beginning. This might be helpful. Some of you have studied Walter Wink, haven't you? What a dear man. I had dinner with him here shortly before he died. He was in Albuquerque. But he, somewhere in one of his writings or books, and forgive me if this is old hat to most of you, it was just real clear for me. He said there's basically 4 worldviews. One, everything is spiritual, which we'll find in a lot of Gnostic, New Age. And it sounds right. I mean, in a way it is right. But he says that's not really the gospel. Everything is material, the modern materialistic worldview. And many of our people are, for all practical purposes, materialists. And many people who come to all of our churches, they do not believe in the reality of the spiritual world in any active sense, that it could really make a difference, trusting in God, believing in God, that God doesn't really heal or stay involved in this material world in any sense. The deists were a form of that, or maybe they were agnostics more, I don't know. Then here's, he said, the most common one among ministers, all of us, that in fact matter and spirit are separate. But our job, if we do church right, is to put them together. And we get up in the pulpit and help everybody put matter and spirit together on Sunday, do you see? And he calls this the theological worldview. The theological worldview. Let's be real theological. Jesus is in your life today. But when you're trying to put them together, it's always willpower and effort, and you feel like it's pretending or wishing. Let's admit that's true. I would say most of the sermons I've ever heard have been from the theological worldview. I, as the preacher, even with this wonderful sacrament I'm about to administer, I'm going to help you put matter and spirit together. He said that's the most devious and deceptive of all three. But what's the fourth? The fourth, and this will be a great lead-in if we teach about Christ, the cosmic Christ tomorrow, or Christ in general. The authentic Christian worldview is the fourth, the incarnational. That matter and spirit have never been separate. That is the meaning of the Christ mystery since the moment of the Big Bang. The first idea in the mind of God was Christ to manifest himself, to reveal his innards in outer form. So everything, and don't call me a pantheist or a New Ager, but the world is the body of God. That's really it. I mean, it's true. The world is all the manifestation of who the Creator is. And carries, as Bonaventure said, his fingerprint, his footprint. The evidence is all there. So, we just didn't teach that well in Catholicism. We made it into carrot on a stick. And here's an example where you really took the worst of Catholicism. And even though we had a more positive anthropology, that was interesting. But because we underplayed theosis, the unfolding from within of your divine nature and revealing to you that you are equally Son of God and Son of earth, just like Jesus was. Son of Mary and Son of God. So the same thing Jesus had to put together, you have to put together. And that's what it means to follow Jesus. I mean, doesn't that just make so much sense? It takes so much false mystery out of it. So, if your people ask or you're struggling with it, use image and likeness. By the way, I think the same distinction is in the Gospels where it speaks, especially in Matthew's Gospel, between baptism in water and the Spirit. Jesus clearly says, John baptized you in water. And we've baptized centuries of Catholics in water. And I guess that wonderful Pentecostal experience those young boys experienced in Cincinnati forever made me aware there is such a thing, and you were calling it being born again, of baptism in the Spirit. An awakening of the water baptism, a stirring into flame. Is it 2 Timothy that says that, or 1 Timothy? Of what is already there. Stir into flame the gift that is already given. That's what our sacraments, what your sermons are all doing. Simply trying to stir into flame subjectively the objective image. The objective image is there, and I think we just have to be adamant on that. You can't soft pedal that. It's the heart of the good news, because as soon as you say, well, you might have it, then it gets back into an achievement contest. It gets back into a performance principle by some hook or crook. And we who are so prone to self-loathing, as Nowen said, we will find just 1,000 ways to deny that we are sons of God, daughters of God. It's just too much to believe. It's too hard. There's so much contrary evidence, isn't there? You know. Did you ever read Ernest Becker's Denial of Death? I would still put it on one of my top 5 books. That maybe it just came to me at the right time. I was in shortly after ordination. It won the Pulitzer Prize. It's a rather heavy non-fiction book. Ernest Becker, Denial of Death. But here's this rather heavy philosophical, theological, anthropological book, you know. And forgive, I hope you're not offended by the word, but somewhere a third into the book, he says, I'm going to just state the contrast for you as hard as I can, so you're going to catch it. Human beings are gods who shit. You're gods who shit. And he said, it's just, And it's always, I use that on the men's initiation. They just love it. We're gods who shit, And we're so aware that we shit, however you want to apply that metaphor, that we're imperfect, we're selfish, we're petty, we're small, we're human, we're physical, we sweat, we urinate and fuck and everything else. This doesn't feel divine, It doesn't feel divine at all.
Some of those things do.
There you go. Clarify. Yeah. This is the great. Why Jesus is the icon of salvation. That I assume, Jesus defecated and urinated and had a penis and was like us in all things, but he did not sin. He never doubted his union with his Father. So it's the same thing we have to overcome. And if we preachers of the gospel, if we don't come in clear and strong, you are children of God, period. Oh, I'm sorry. You're a dog of God. Yes, you're a dog of God. Because otherwise, we just wiggle out of it. We wiggle out and we say, when. And we Catholics, to make them dependent on us, we made it all depend upon getting that water poured over them. And I'd be willing to bet 80% of Catholics think they don't have the Holy Spirit until the priest pours the water over them. Because we've told them that 100 times, actually, to keep them coming. And, of course, we created limbo. You heard about that, that if you didn't get the water poured over you, and we didn't know what to do with all these little infants who appeared so innocent, we said, well, they go to limbo. Now, that's one good thing Benedict did, too. Benedict said, no, limbo does not exist. But that hung on for centuries. We actually, in the old Catholic cemeteries, even here in Albuquerque, there's a corner of the Catholic cemetery. Talk about punishing the victim. But women who lost their baby right away they weren't allowed to be buried in consecrated ground, whatever that means. As if there's anything as unconsecrated ground, But there was a little corner of the cemetery. I always want to weep when I go there. What those mothers they had to go over there and bury their little baby. They're still grieving its death. But it's not in heaven, it's in limbo. That's where, of course, where being in limbo came from. Was there a hand? Yes, Jeff.
Follow-up. To state it real starkly,
all right.
There's a sense in which my understanding I would give a caveat or a limitation to saying we're all children of God.
Okay.
But there was a sense in which I'm born in the image and likeness of God in some sense, but I became a child of God through this birth of the Spirit. So I think of the language in John's prologue where he says, to as many as received him,
yes,
as believed in his name, to them he gave the power or the right to become children of God, children who were born of the Spirit, not of a husband's will or human flesh, but born of the Spirit. And so when I hear that sounds like there's a sense in which I was not God's child. I was born through the Spirit into becoming a child of God in a way that is ontologically different than before that encounter with the Spirit. So that's kind of where my question is coming from.
Yeah. I don't think you want to stay there. I don't think that's good. I really don't. I think that's a mistake we Catholics made. There's no ontological difference. Do you understand? It's bringing to consciousness. So the fact that I'm able to tell you are a son of God, that I believe in. My God, I'm a son of God. Well, now, once you bring the unconscious to the conscious, I admit there's going to be a big difference. in capacity, in readiness, and in receptivity, in mutuality. So in that sense, yeah, the journey begins, but there's a way that little Hindu children understand they're children of God too. You understand? And no water is poured. And there's a way that Abraham and Moses seem to understand that without water being poured. So that is our language, but know that it's in-house language, which is acceptable in-house, that we are now giving you the Holy Spirit. Yes, but, do you understand? They already had it. You're awakening the gift that is already given. So all I'd ask you to do, not throw out those scriptures in any sense, but go back and read them with this as a possibility, and you'll see it still works. You understand? You have been given the gift of your childhood in God. Well, did we objectively give it? Well, we did, subjectively. We gave it subjectively, which until you have it subjectively, you don't appreciate it objectively. Got it? But it's always been there. Right? So it is a matter of becoming who you already are. Now, people are going to fight you on it, particularly people I find from the Reformed or evangelical tradition, because it just sounds so scary for some reason, when you think it would sound good. But I guess they think it's wishful thinking or too much. And wouldn't the gospel almost come across as too good to be true? It is. It's too good to be true. And I think the ego fights it. It wants to earn it.
This is a way I think about this. When Adam and Eve ate from the tree, they went to the pit. And they were still son and daughter of God in the presence of God. But so that separation is closing your eyes or closing your soul.
It's all from our side.
And it's subjective. Mm-hmm. But they believed it, and so it was their reality. And salvation, the inbreaking of God in your life, is sort of waking up to realizing you lived in a lie. You believed in a duality that didn't exist.
It feels to me like, it feels in my own experience, though, it's like it's still something more than that. And that's what I think I wrestle with, because when I'm honest, I mean, there was a season in which I kind of believed in God and tried to follow, but didn't have within myself. And so I think there's a point at which, in my experience, I feel like something got implanted in me, which I can only describe as God or the Spirit of God, but now there was a power operative in my life that wasn't there.
I feel like it's like a visual, like you probably saw this. I'm over here, God's over here, and there's a gap between us. You know that those analogies, like those pictures that shaped it. Whereas maybe it looks more like it's way deep inside. I shut off somehow. Do you know
like you're opening the valve.
You're just opening the valve.
Faith does that.
It didn't come out from out here. No, you just cut yourself off from the deepest part.
That's actually maybe
good. Do keep struggling with it, because it will pull together so many things. That the gift of God is planted from the very beginning, is inherently yours. And here's the way I've said it to some people. All the change is from your side. There's no change. What we mean by the one and eternal covenant is that the unilateral gift of God's self toward creation is once and for all and forever. That's the meaning of the new and eternal covenant. And when Jeremiah says, the law will be planted within your heart, that's the new covenant. In that sense, and I believed like you did as a little Catholic, or the way you used to, I guess. I really think we were living in the old covenant. You understand? And it was so hard to get the new and eternal covenant through. And it's interesting that Jesus uses that very phrase in the institution of the Eucharist. Again, almost this ingestion that became the sacrament of ingesting a mystery, but it's really awakening a mystery. I don't think we teach the new and eternal covenant very well. That God's covenant with humanity is inherent from the beginning, absolute and forever, and never withdrawn. The only change is from our side. As you grow in it, as you awaken to it, as you allow it, as you enjoy it, as you receive it. But it will be experienced, just as Mark was telling you, and you seem to understand, that it feels like it came from without. Yeah.
Something that wasn't there.
Yeah. And see, there's where I think most of us, in terms of our theology of grace, would very much hold to. It did come from without, but it's only the time issue. It came from without from the beginning. You didn't generate it. You're absolutely right of that. But it's the time question that this gift from without of God's election of you, choice of you, beloved status granted you was from the moment of your conception. Yeah. Yes.
Another way I've been thinking about it is if the change is really from my side, and I guess we could call that repentance, and there is fruit.
Yeah, that's good.
Repentance bears fruit so that you do see things differently.
Yeah.
But nothing has changed from God's side. It's not like a payment. This goes back to the atonement.
It's going to be the same thing as the atonement. You got it. Excellent.
And you can read Genesis 1 that way. You know that I'm a daughter of God by creation.
By creation.
By the Creator. As opposed to by my choice. Even though my choice is my participation with the Creator. So anyway, I'm just thinking about that.
Sure.
As I hear your question.
Charles?
So my Lutheran theology is coming back to me now. I don't know if this plays into how it's approached from you, Richard, but Luther believed in single predestination. In eternity, God saw us, loved us, knew us. In eternity, is that on the same?
When you said single, what did you mean by that?
Well, I put words into someone else called, but double predestination would mean that God also then saw and damned his own.
See, I wouldn't have known that. Okay.
Just say, no, Paul only speaks of that in eternity God saw you and loved you, and it takes great hope in that our salvation is not necessarily connected to some, by chance I had Christian parents. So he pushes it all the way back in eternity and says, God knew you and God loved you in eternity.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's exactly what you're saying.
Well, it sure feels in that direction, yeah.
It's a way for me to kind of put a shame. I want to get here.
As a Lutheran. Let me come at it, and I was going to get into this more when I introduce Scotus more tomorrow morning when we talk about the cosmic Christ, although we might get to it today, I guess. The common Catholic opinion in the 13th century was the analogy of being. Have you ever heard that? Tillich was really rediscovering this when he made God the ground of all being. But what Aquinas taught was God was pure being itself, right? And everything else, your being and the being of this dog and that being of that tree, are beings by analogy, only by analogy. The word pure being as such, we participate in it, but we understand it only analogously. That was the common opinion. Now, one of the other reasons I'm so happy to be a Scotist, Scotus at great length taught the univocity of being. This will get it. Univocity means one voice. When you, Scotus in the Franciscan school, this came from Francis calling everything brother and sister and the wind and the air and brother, sun, sister, moon. That's what we've got in this room. That's brother, sun over there and the sister, moon here. Was a real philosophical development of Francis's intuition. And he said you could speak with one voice. It wasn't analogous. It wasn't metaphor. With one voice of the being of God, he took the whole chain of being, the being of angels, the being of humans, the being of animals, the being of trees, the being of the water, and the being of the earth. They all participate in the same being. Now, you've got to realize that changes a lot. if we are all participating in the same being, grace is inherent from the beginning. I'm just trying to say what Luther said a different. That grace is not a later addition. That's why I say it in my next book that's coming up on Franciscan mysticism. You would have thought that Christians would have been on the front line of believers in evolution. You just think we would have, of course. And yet we were the ones who fought it the most, it seems, Because it's a disjointed, separate universe for most Christians. God is the creator, we are the creatures. Now I know we got to keep that separate. Remember the two circles, I don't disagree with that. But that there's an organic relationship between the two, that's what our our lack of non-dual mind couldn't deal with. That we didn't get to any dynamic unity between creator and creature. Scotus laid the foundation for it in strongly teaching the univocity of all being. All being may be spoken of with one voice, and you're speaking truthfully when you call this being and your being and God's being being. They are not separate. They share in one participatory universe of truth or reality. Yes, Tillich comes along and uses the beautiful phrase, the ground of being, which is, that works in our way of thinking. But because most, again, follow the mainline Catholic position, the analogy of being, it still remained a separate universe. Everything was distinct, and our job was to put it back together. The theological worldview of Walter Wing, it's separate. But we, by hard work, moral effort, strong belief systems, and beautiful liturgies on Sunday, we can put it back together again. That's the way we were raised. And I think it's an impossible task. I mean, man, that's just my opinion, maybe. I find that people never get there because they always feel like they're not worthy enough, haven't spun the prayer wheel enough if you're Catholic, haven't studied the scriptures enough maybe if you're Protestant. But the doctrine of the univocity of being, here's the question it solves, that grace is inherent from the beginning and is unfolding from within. Got it? That's why I say we should have believed in evolution. Should have been the first people to accept that things that God created, He created them so creatively that they continue to create themselves. They just like you do. I mean, we should see that. We can see it in the human species, but we don't grant this liberty. And there's no species where it's more apparent than the dogs. You've watched that series on dogs. We all know they came from wolves. And no species has produced and evolved into so many that this one's related to the Great Dane and the poodle and those little chihuahuas, that they're all brothers and sisters, is certainly hard to believe. How could that happen? They don't look anything the same, but they all have the same wolf psychology, that same desire to be in the pack and loved by the group and so forth. And thank God this particular one replaced us with the pack. We're his pack or her pack. So, when I teach you this, I'm not saying you've got to agree with me. But I do offer it to you as a gift to think about, to pray about, and to, when you go back to your scriptures, I don't think it's going to lessen your appreciation for the Word of God in the least. You're just going to have a different lens and say, my God, could that be what Jeremiah meant? I will plant it within you. I will plant, and this will be the new covenant. Jeremiah 31. What else is planted within us? Of course, it was always planted within us, but Jeremiah is simply saying, you're going to be the people who can believe this. You're ready to believe this great truth of the new and eternal covenant. And eternal, in other words, from all eternity. So I'm agreeing with Luther, very, very much so. It's pre-existent. And Jeremiah says that while I was in the womb, you still loved me. That was my reading of my first Mass. So that will also lay the foundation for the cosmic Christ. So I'm glad I could put out that little piece. The doctrine of the univocity of all being. Anything else, though, on our two little handouts from this morning? Yes, AJ?
I didn't have a question, but I guess I will say something not to take up our time. So I was schooled to have a very low anthropology, intelligent probably. And then when I came out of my THM, I had to understand the gift of theosis through Kirkheim, who's actually and so it led me to this place where I had this extremely low anthropology until this sort of reception, similar to Jeff, as an external reception of the Holy Spirit. It then led me to this incredibly high anthropology, becoming like the conversation was no longer are you good or bad, but it's are you dead or alive.
That's a nice way to put it. Yeah.
But it's
are you
still,
dead or alive?
It still was a polarity that I feel like really challenging, in that if we take Augustine out of the equation, it leaves us always with a high anthropology. And so, yeah, I feel like that's something that I just really want to sit with is it possible that this high anthropology has been the game all along? And I'm just interested as I go back to the text with your gift and challenge of seeing what comes out of those texts that I've always utilized to affirm my low anthropology before the reception of the gift of the Spirit that then leads me into, theosis, deification. It's just going to be very interesting for me. It's like,
Have you read that Michael Christensen collection? He teaches at Drew University in New Jersey. I'll bring it in tomorrow. Help me remember that. Yeah, where he collects the early and later teachers on theosis, and I really think it's the core of the good news. I don't think it's good news without it. It really isn't. It's all a contest at which few win.
Well, especially when you have John 10 and Psalm 82. Jesus would
Oh, yeah.
by saying we're gods.
Yeah.
How did we miss that?
How did we miss that? Yeah. It really does strike you as wishful thinking or overstatement or New Age heresy. If I hadn't had so many years to absorb it from my early Franciscan training, I would still share in your shock. But now I'm more shocked that why doesn't everybody see what this is really our message? This is it. It's like we missed the core. The good news was too good to be true. It's too good to be true.
What happens, I feel like, because at the time I was serving in the Reformed tradition, I think what happens is it feels too prideful to say. Yes. First of all, there's a confusion between absorption and union.
Yeah, very good.
Get people to get to union.
Union and not absorption.
It feels prideful. I think this is why. I think it feels like there's a massive gap between the human and between God's self. And to see your circles as an overlap into the life of God, into the energies of God, to see that we're being attached to this thing called, this bird called God. I think the pride thing comes in us kind of standing alone here, we're God, and there's a rival, in a sense. And that feels, I think, prideful to the first time someone's introduced to theosis from a background such as mine. If we would have the audacity to come to God at such a level of saying, you've created me to be co-heirs with Christ, that feels a bit prideful, I think, for most in that tradition.
From the false self-position of the separate self, this feels like arrogance. Once you know it's God in you that loves God, it's not you anyway. What we were trying to preserve, and here we all agree, I think, is the idea that it's all the gift of God. And I'm not doing it. It's not the I. It is the gift of God. The only thing really is we're changing our understanding of time, and that it doesn't come in a moment of time when water is poured. Yes, that it comes from God. It is pure gift. Now, what does happen in time is the subjective aha. And that will feel like grace descending from the heavens. It will feel like a dove alighting on your head. But it wasn't God who alighted. It was you who awakened to the alighting that happened at the moment of your conception. All I'm saying is it will bear much more good fruit in the long run when people can constantly know, I'm not being true to my own self. It's not a matter of aligning with somebody's moral doctrine. It's the law planted in my heart, the natural law of who I am, and who I am is Son of God and Son of Earth, and the Son of Earth, with all of its concomitant evidence, does not cancel out the Son of God. Whew. It's going to take so much work to trust that. You just want to give them all the help they can. Do you understand? And when it's all dependent upon you doing it right, getting the sacrament right, or believing the doctrine right, you've just got 10 more reasons not to trust the good news. You do. We've made it too easy for people to not believe in the gospel, because there's so much contrary evidence to begin with. That's my point I'm going to keep returning to. Your need to feel worthy is going to find so much confirming evidence that you're unworthy. So a God-planted worthiness within you, but let me say it strongly, it has nothing to do with you. So this is why the pride issue is your worthiness, I don't want to offend you, your worthiness has nothing to do with you. It's all the gift of God. All the total God. That's what divine election means, divine choice, that he has chosen AJ from all eternity. And there will never be another AJ, and there never was. That's haxiety, too, the thisness of everything.
Would you agree with Tillich's phrase, to accept our acceptance despite being unacceptable? Does that unacceptable?
Does he say that?
Yeah, as long as his courage to be.
God, I read that in college. I didn't remember that. Despite being unacceptable. Well, I'd certainly accept the first part.
Right.
To accept being accepted is the moment of salvation. Despite being unacceptable. Well, I guess on my first tapes in 1973, I said, everybody was reading, I'm okay, you're okay. You young ones wouldn't remember that book, probably. I'm okay, you're okay. And it was totally being clever. And others have said it, of course. You're not okay, I'm not okay, and that's okay. So maybe I was saying the same thing as Tillich, despite being unacceptable. Was he reformed, Tillich? What was he?
He was an existentialist.
Existential? No. Okay. You really have to accept that most reformed people have a huge burden to overcome, and it really and some beautiful how far you've gotten considering that. Is the people like the Grand Rapids? That's reformed too, isn't it? See, and do you see what they did? Robert Schuller and who was the other power of positive thinking? Norman Vincent Peale.
Yeah, he was reformed.
See, do you see what they do? And I understand. To overcome their negative anthropology, they actually switch sides and become super, super, super positive. Everything is beautiful. It was the only way they could, in my opinion, I don't know their biography, but it's the only way they could overcome their terribly negative worldview, is to exactly proclaim the opposite. Have you ever heard Robert Schuller, the Crystal Cathedral?
there's a historical reason why believing we're the sons and daughters of God is difficult for us. And that is, if you look at us compared to what Jesus achieved in his enlightenment, it leaves begs the question: if we were seeing as he saw, why aren't we like him?
Why aren't we doing better?
And it could be just his compassion, but also the miracles and the willingness to die for the love of the world. That I don't know.
Our Saint Francis de Sales was the very kind bishop in Geneva. And he was almost the polar opposite of Calvin. I guess they were. And his big line in reaction to the Calvinists was, "You will catch many more flies with a teaspoon of honey than a barrel of vinegar." He just say this all the time. And so he liked to just walk around Geneva giving people a teaspoon of honey. It's what I'm trying to say. When you can't start with no, or you never get back to yes. And I feel that's what Calvin's negative anthropology did. It started with such a terrible no to the incarnation. See, we made the incarnation only in Jesus. We're the second coming of Christ. Forgive me, I don't mean that in a New Age way, but that's the whole doctrine of the body of Christ. That's Paul. That's not heresy. That we always made him the exclusive Son of God instead of the inclusive Son of God. There we get back to your archetype question you asked the first day. If we'd see Jesus archetypally, or as I'm going to give you the handout, the Alpha and the Omega of everything, what I have done, you also must do. And in fact, you will do greater things than I have done. Is he having prideful expectations of us? Or honest expectations? That we were supposed to continue the synthesis, if I can use that word, that he represented, that he exemplified, that he proclaimed. And we thought we were doing him a favor by worshiping it in him. That's why my Catholic Church became worship, 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 and very little social justice. Just worship services, preoccupation with liturgy. So we worshiped him instead of followed him. That's it in a word. And he never asked us to worship him directly, to my knowledge. I don't think he did. But worship gets you off the hook of following. It really does. Yes, Nace?
One of the verses growing up, sharing a gospel or a mode of salvation, plan of salvation, Ephesians 2:8-9, by faith, and one of the things we always make fun of Catholics for how they miss that. By grace you saved through faith, and not of yourself, but the gift of God. Not a result of works that no one would boast. Let me just chunk it right there. And for me, a big part has been before we are his workmanship, which is an artesian word of that we were handcrafted by God for good works, which he created beforehand for us to do, to do or to walk in them. Which goes back to your timelessness. Our issue is before we were, he was, and he created from within us to be, and then once, whatever transfer, faith, he's molded us to do. And it's a very, growing up so much with 2:8-9.
That's just as good as it gets. As good as it gets. It's all there. It is by grace you have been saved through faith, not by anything of your own, by a gift from God, not by anything that you have done, so that nobody can claim the credit. We are God's work of art, created in Christ Jesus for the good works which God has already designated to make up our way of life. This is the New Jerusalem, which I was educated in. Wow, and I have written in the column, the only question is, who is the doer of this? And the question is, God is the doer, not us. But yeah, it comes down to when. But you're right, I don't know if your translation has that word already there. He's already done this. Prepared before him. Yeah.
I have a bit from the stages stuff.
Oh, yes, please.
Last year I read Invitation to Love by Thomas Keating, and he really, that seems to be, it's really making a connection between contemplative prayer and moving up the stages. And I was just curious if you had a thought on that, if you're familiar with what he's trying to do to link style dynamics.
You know, I like Keating's teaching very much. My only disappointment in Keating is I don't think he brings in social justice enough.
Yeah.
But what he does in terms of recognizing a prayer that touches the unconscious, unloads, he likes to use that term, unloads the unconscious. And if we would have had longer, I believe it's a leap of faith to move between every single stage. And you will not move unless you've unloaded the garbage that keeps you in the previous stage. Now, God does the unloading through the events of life itself. If you're listening, if you're humble, if you're honest, it just happens. But I like that, if I'm understanding how you're interpreting Keating, that he sees, and he got this from Wilbur too, or they got it together, I guess, that religion's function culturally, historically, is to grease the wheels of consciousness so humanity will grow up. So humanity will grow up and reach the omega point, which is the Christ. We would say. I don't know, Ken Wilber wouldn't say it that way. But I find that very helpful. And I think it becomes a real critique. As a German, again, I can say it, that, if there was one country that was obsessed with theology, it was Germany. obsessed with theology. And you go there, and there's just churches like in America, you've probably been there, churches. And that's where the First World War emerges and the Second World War. Does that have any lesson for the world? That you could be obsessed with good Christian theology, but not have transformed people. And I've been able to have very honest talks like this with the Germans, and they weep over it, the truth of it. That how could we be so interested in Christianity and get it so wrong twice in a row, Gee. So we got to listen to the signs of the times, that maybe there's a way to be obsessed with the gospel and actually miss the gospel. We didn't find a form of prayer that invaded the unconscious, that evolved history to a higher place. Very often there was so much repression. That's what Carl Jung is saying about the German-speaking peoples too. They're just totally out of touch with their shadow. It's been a religion of denial of interiority and denial of the shadow self, which is why he just couldn't bear Christianity any longer.
The way Keating describes it, contemplative prayer is like surgery. Maybe to correct the false self, or I'm trying to make too many links there. The other question I have for you is, if you have any thoughts on how to be a spiritual director for people at different stages. And the other question I'm asking is, how much time should I spend with somebody who's too far away from me?
On either direction, huh?
Yeah.
Too far beyond you or too far behind?
Like sometimes I feel it, sometimes I travel and speak a lot, and I wonder, am I any good to these people because we're two stages apart?
Yeah.
Think in the terms that
if they are egocentrically invested in defending their stage, which would only be the lower stages, you can't do very much. You will throw your pearls before swine, to use Jesus. And I wouldn't use such an unkind metaphor if Jesus hadn't used it first, but it's true. You're wasting your time. Gil Bailey said it well. How was it? He said, an existing ideology of resentment, which you're invested in, proving you're right, and there's a malicious character toward anybody who disagrees with you. And when you confront an existing ideology of resentment, whatever you say will be used to deepen that resentment. That's my experience. Whatever you could stand on your head. You could be Jesus, as Jesus, proved. You could be Jesus to the scribes and Pharisees, and even whatever you say will be used against you. You can work miracles in front of them, and no, you have a demon. So a malicious intent, and I get letters of that way that usually are not signed, but sometimes they are signed. When they're so malicious, they're just inclined to hurt, sent to hurt. I don't answer those. But I'll tell you, the more I get are half-sincere, struggling. Father Richard, you said this. Isn't that going against the Holy Father? But they say it so humbly. These people are changeable. Now, we often have in spiritual direction the custom of only committing to one, at the most 2 meetings from the beginning. That, do you agree? I will meet with you next Wednesday, but we are both 100% free after that meeting to say, I don't think we have the gift for one another, for whatever reason. I have to say that to you. You will not take it personal. You will not get you have to find some way to say that to folks. And if you're not granted the gift, and it is a gift, of feeling some love for that person, I don't think you should be their spiritual director. I don't think you should. You're not doing them a favor. And sometimes it takes till a second meeting, and you recognize, no, I could love this person. But there are natural blockages, antipathies, personality, where I know I can't be with him, be with her in a gracious way. And it's my problem. I got my blockages. You don't have to say that to him or her. But unless the flow is granted of empathy for that person, and unless you see some openness on that person to grow and change, then I wouldn't be their spiritual director. That's right. If they're coming to be affirmed at level 3 and want you to just confirm that this is it, you're throwing your pearls before swine. You are. And they will turn and trample you. It doesn't work. Now, if what these guys and gals say is true, that the most you can comprehend is some one level beyond yourself, I would say to be a good spiritual director, you have to at least be level 4 to pull them forward. And what it means to be a higher level is to be able to understand and have empathy for all the previous levels. So this is a call to us. If you can't love and stretch yourself to love level 2 people, well, you shouldn't be their spiritual director, but it means you're probably not a level 4 person either. Do you understand? Because if you've gone through 2, you can understand a sincere level 2 person. You can't go back to that. We deal with this in confession. We call them scrupulous Catholics. They're just obsessed with laws and moralisms and come in and list all their sins and bore you to death. And if you can't say, well, I was there once as a teenager, I thought everything was a sin. So I can stand in their shoes and talk to them kindly. Now, God doesn't hate you for this. Can you trust in the mercy of God a little more? The most you can do is stretch them a little bit. But here's the problem too. If you talk, let's say she is a level 2 lady, invested in it, and you're talking straight out of level 4 or 5, you will go over her head. She will call you a heretic and report you in our church to the bishop. Oh, so you're no point in doing it. It'll go over her head or his head. They cannot not think of you as a New Ager, a Catholic, a heretic, a sinner. And you've all faced that, I'm sure. That's why the prophets are killed. Okay, we got 45 minutes. You want a little stand-up break at least? Well, you don't have to take long, but I don't want to cut your time short. And then I guess Matt's going to come in with you today, and then we'll have our buffet. I think it's going to get pretty cool as soon as that sun goes down tonight. So we might have to move it inside, I don't know. But there's going to be beer tonight, so that'll make it a little more bearable. Medicate. Just 5 minutes. Let's take 5 minutes, yeah. So Bobby, Lippert was your last name?
Yes.
And your wife is
Holm.
Holm. Is that a German name too?
English.
English.
Put them together, and home proves to be problematic for people over the phone.
Oh, yes, you have to spell it each time. Yeah.
Lippert seems pretty obvious to most folks.
Yeah.
I grew up with that, very easy.
Yeah, easy.
And the hyphen trips up every communication.
Yeah. I am finding, at least out here, less and less couples doing it. I don't have any opinion, hyphenated, because of the children, and then what do they do and all that. Right. But I admire you for trying it. There's obviously no right way or wrong way to do it. And the Spanish speakers have been doing it for centuries. But they just don't use one of them, except in their formal signature. You understand? Yeah. A lot of them hardly ever use it, but they know it. They know they have both last names. Just don't use it except formal.
That might be a better practical way.
It might be a practical way to resolve it. If you do have kids, that's where it'll start getting difficult.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was sort of a big, I didn't realize how big of an identity journey it would be.
I've had many say that, so don't feel you're unusual. Yeah. For her and for you, probably. Yeah.
Really. Something I didn't expect. But then I got into researching a little bit and discovered, gosh, there is no way. I mean, I was locked into it.
Yep.
I mean, I was saying that which is ridiculous.
Yes.
You see the world and history.
No, you acknowledged something real good, and what you went through was probably real good. To struggle with it, to ask why, what value am I trying to preserve? Whether it'll be advantageous long run, only you can answer.
Philip was a Lutheran pastor in Flint.
Oh, he was. You didn't know it yourself. You went and checked just now. Oh. See, the gift of the two is humility. You know that? Yes.
That's right. I think he was Lutheran.
The gift of the two is humility.
Missouri Synod?
No, German.
German Lutheran.
Yeah, and his father was a Lutheran pastor too, so interesting.
I think Marcus Ford grew up in Missouri
Yes,
Synod.
yeah.
He did?
Yeah.
Grew up what?
In North Dakota.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep.
I told him, I think you're still reacting to your 1930s upbringing in North Dakota.
Picture of the dog in there. That's great.
I mean, and that's the picture of the dog.
Richard in there. Thank you for humbling me. That's cute. she was left as a little puppy on the front porch here 9 years ago, and the director at that time said, well, I'll take her home for the night. And I said, well, okay, we'll decide what to do with her tomorrow. And as I'm walking him to the car, I said, oh, look, Venus is bright in the sky tonight. Yeah, and he came back the next morning, he said, let's keep her and name her Venus. So that's how she got the name. Yeah. Goddess of love, Venus. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Lord. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind shutting it again, just so people, when they walk through, they don't bother us. Thank you. Anything else about our stages that you think might just make helpful conversation?
I guess I think Wilbur, maybe it was another book called Theory of Everything, where he said the best way to help someone in their stage is to drive them to the logical conclusions of it, and then they'll see the absurdity of it. And that will help them transcend. And I've wondered if I haven't had the courage to use this technique, but I've wondered if that would, for people who are stuck in a certain view of their faith, they're really shame-based. You turn the knob, turn up the volume until it just doesn't work anymore.
Well, what I have experienced is immense pushback. Human beings just don't like to be proven wrong or have to admit they made a mistake, in your presence at least. I just find they have to come to that illogicality by it falling apart, by it not working in their own experience. I found it sometimes helpful, in fact often, to help people clarify their assumptions. What does that assume? Let's take the atonement thing. This assumes that God doesn't organically love God's creation. That the covenant love of God is not forever. It goes off and on and had to be turned back on. And a lot of people can, oh yeah, I never thought that. This assumes that God the Father is sort of petty. That God the Father isn't free. That God the Father isn't naturally in love with His creation. A lot of people, their eyes just open up. It does assume that, doesn't it? So the clarifying of assumptions is very often a less threatening path to go on than forcing them. That's just my experience. That doesn't make it right. One point that I thought might be worth bringing up, where is that at? I think it's surprising to many liberal types. I think I put it in here. The rediscovery of hierarchy. He says, and you don't have to agree with it, but I have found it to be true. I know so many nuns after the early discovery of feminism in the late 80s, especially early 90s, when it was just, so many nuns were just aware, thank God, of their feminine status in our patriarchal church. And they had to push back, and they didn't want the Our Father, because it implied that God was masculine. And it took us years to work through it. We just have to use inclusive language if you're in a Catholic, sophisticated setting today. And that's good. It absolutely is good. But with many of those same sisters, many of whom have just beautiful spiritual lives, I'm sure you've met some of these nuns who really know God, really love God, and really serve God. It's what whole thing's about. But they've almost all gotten over that. There's been this rediscovery, not of church hierarchy, that's not what I'm talking about, but that the very principle of hierarchy, that there is such a thing as leadership, exemplarity, being beyond, that we need elders, we need people in stage 8 or 9 to model it for us. And we're not doing any good to just shoot down any notion of growth in the name that that's going to create egalitarianism. It's a very subtle issue. I just want to name it. You don't even have to agree with it, but it's worth reflecting on. That I find the most mature people put their energy elsewhere than shooting down all hierarchy. Maybe hierarchy isn't the best word. The reason I use it is because Wilbur uses it, the rediscovery of hierarchy. I'm just saying the reappreciation for eldership, for seniority, for growth, for maturity. Without it, the Flat Earth Society, as he calls it, is that really our goal, to prove that nobody's any better? Damn it, I'm sorry I even have to use the word. Ontologically, none of us are any better than one another. But that there are people with more experience, who've been taught in different ways, who have something to offer us. It's really, Eastern religions are so much more upfront and honest about that. And we feel humiliated by it, but they say the message is passed on energetically when you're in the presence of a guru. I know we don't like that word, and I don't really like it myself. But when you're in the presence of someone who's more evolved, more mature, farther along the journey than you are, they rub off on you. And you need that to grow up. I think we have something to learn from them. And as I said real quickly, I think it was part of what we Catholics meant by the cult of the saints, which we overdid, terribly did, I admit all that. But most people need biographies. They need models, and which is, again, the Jesus thing, that we couldn't fall in love with the Logos. We couldn't. You can't fall in love with the Logos, but you can sure fall in love with Jesus. We need personifications to get things. And I introduced that to you early on as exemplary causality. We need examples. I think there's much room for discussion, growth, and we Americans who've idealized democracy, even though we really don't practice it, but we have it in our ideology that this some wonderful thing that everybody's the same. I don't think that's not honest, it's not true, and it's not doing anybody a favor to pull everybody down into the Flat Earth Society. And so eager, you see it in our media, as soon as there's someone who's a hero, we've got to disprove it. She isn't that great. He isn't that great. Find out their tragic flaw. Well, of course, it's always there. Always there, you know. So don't go that direction. And I don't sense it in this group. But, boy, I would say in our church, between 85 and 2000, it took over the Catholic world, just because we've been oppressed by hierarchy more than you have. But it's interesting to me that most of us are beyond. We just let the hierarchy do their thing, because there's some good ones, and we'll just appreciate the good ones. But I only have one lifetime, and I'm going to spend my life hating bishops and hating popes, and hating priests, and hating anybody who doesn't say it exactly like me, because then I become hate. And it appeals more to the liberal instinct than the gospel instinct. That's my real point. And when I found Ken Wilber saying the same thing from a non-Christian perspective, I said, he's on to something there. It's important. So I've got that. Oh, it's under level 6, yeah. The Flat Earth Society that dislikes all hierarchy and idealizes egalitarianism. And even, in the name of pluralism, multiculturalism, I know this is dangerous, don't quote me, I guess it's being taped. We're supposed to say all cultures are equal. I don't think that's true. I really don't think that's true. That every culture has something to offer, and every culture better be respected, and you better find an ability to say yes to it. But it's pretty clear to me, having traveled the world, some cultures are at level 2, all right? And since I've been making fun of the Germans, I grew up ashamed of being German and not really that eager to even go there to see these Nazis, forgive me, who are 6s on the Enneagram, which they agree with. The country is overwhelmingly 6. But if you understand the 6, a lot goes with that. But wow, did I fall in love with the German culture. And that affirmed for me, the greater light you have, the greater shadow you cast. It's an extraordinary culture. I mean, just the level of conversation in the beer gardens. I'd love you to just tape a beer garden German conversation and an American bar conversation. Night and day. Night and day. They hardly watch television, at least in the circles. Television, I saw it 2 weeks ago. Everything is the arts of conversation. The French would be the same way. That really, you just feel, this was a delightfully human evening. Now, it was accompanied by wine and beer, of course. But a German culture, I believe, is a high culture. Now, English culture is too, French culture. Plenty of it. I'm not trying to pick out the Germans. But I've been to cultures where, wow, I mean, women are demeaned, children are neglected. There's no capacity for humane conversation about anything except food or sex. That's all you can talk about, food and sex. Wow. But I know in the name of political correctness, I'm supposed to say all cultures are equal. No. Some people have grown up to an amazing degree through doing it wrong, like the Germans. And their awareness of the earth in Germany, it's got to be the most green culture in the world. Just, like everybody's aware. Everybody's aware that I would meet. They just can't believe it that we use styrofoam in America. You would just never get away. Styrofoam is eternal, I hope they don't serve our meal in styrofoam tonight. But it's just like God, and we don't even think of it, it's probably against the law. It's probably verboten in Germany, to use styrofoam because it's going to destroy the earth, and plastic the same way. Now, maybe they made a religion out of it. Maybe they probably are legalistic about that. But I'm just saying all this and the German and English cultures, who I would say are outstanding cultures. I was never pro-English either, because they oppressed us, and oppressed half of the world. But they are both cultures that respect hierarchy. Now, I know the bad side of it, the class system and all the rest. But when you respect class, you also respect human dignity, that there's a good way to do things. And once you set a standard, there's a good way to do things, my opinion is it calls a lot of people to that better way of doing things. And I just see the reverse movement, the downward mobility of how can you be as crass and as obscene. And we're going in that direction somewhat ourselves, But I think we have both. America, in my opinion, has both movements. A pull up and a pull down. I don't know which one's going to win. But that's what makes America so dynamic. It's both directions. But I don't know if anybody have any comments on that. You don't have to agree with what I said. You really don't. You really don't.
I think this is really in integral spirituality. He mentions like the Dalai Lama being someone who is at a high level of enlightenment, but has cultural homophobia and things things like that.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was interesting, or it would seem like Mother Teresa in some ways.
Yes.
Hard edge at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I'd say the same about the Amish. I mentioned that the other day. It seemed like so many groups, very enlightened in one area, and will have one or two dark sides. Pope Francis, as a bishop in Argentina, made some rather regressive statements about sexuality. It'd be interesting if he ever repeats them, or if he has grown up since then. Yeah. That's that wanting of perfection. That if the Dalai Lama isn't perfect in every area,
Right.
I don't have to listen to him. So I can shoot him down. He made a homophobic statement, you know. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that at all? I know it's delicate. And I, as a Franciscan, will always, with Jesus and Francis, take the side of the poor and the little guy and honor what's good there. So I know that's firm in my identity and my practice. And yet after saying that, I'm going to defend the little guy and protect the poor and the excluded. I still recognize there is a function that evolved, educated people serve in civilization, and that you need both. You really need both. The trouble is most of us just idealize the top. We all want to be the Queen of England, you know. I guess, maybe not. And without the balancing act of the love of the poor and the love of the least of the brothers and sisters that Jesus gave us. And I still, for me, this for me is a touchstone of authentic Christianity. If I don't see an honoring of the poor, the outsider, the little one, you can have all the sophisticated Christian theology you want, and the final touchstone of orthodoxy, for me, isn't there. It isn't there. It's become another elitism. So I just want to add that on, so you don't think I don't believe that too. That's where my heart is more at. But my intellect tells me we can't shoot down creative, educated, sophisticated, mature, mannered, even mannered people. When I see how we've gone to the other extreme, you know, where no one owes anybody any politeness, and how safe and happy I feel in Germany and England. I'll just pick those two. There's others of this, where everybody greets you, gives you space, gives you order around your space so you can be who you want to be, and doesn't invade it. Boy, that feels good. Yeah.
More of a personal question. How do you, given just how prolific you are, certainly how that's continued to grow, what's your relationship like with the Vatican?
I was only studied once, and the offending issue was the Enneagram, although they went out from that. And I was sent a long letter. I had 3 months to answer it. I didn't make it public because that I don't need to be a cause célèbre, you know. And this tells me, I hope I don't sound too arrogant, but this was under John Paul II. These cardinals running these curial, they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, I had no trouble answering the 19 questions with just, a medium-sized paragraph. And I waited in trepidation for 3 more months. They don't speed it up. They'd love to make you squirm, I'm sure. But I got a letter back from a cardinal. I've still got it. You have answered all of our questions to our satisfaction. God bless you in your ministry. It was really very polite. So that has to be filed over there somewhere. But again, it wasn't that hard to answer. I mean, it was a lot of this stuff of will and grace and sin and morality, and I just answered them. Now, I'll tell you some funny stories. You need some humor. The local bishop The local bishop is the one he's still the Archbishop of Santa Fe. This is a prestigious diocese because it's one of the oldest. So once you're made Archbishop of Santa Fe, you don't go any higher. You stay here forever because you can't go any higher. Santa Fe has great prestige. So I've been stuck with him for 25 years, but I think we've reached a détente, and a sincere one. Someone sent him my 2 CD sets on the Trinity. And I can't get more orthodox. I say it in very different ways. And they say it blew him away, that he now tells people Richard Rohr is orthodox. But before he came to that, you see, when you're a member of a religious order, we're democratic. And when they say the Catholic Church isn't democratic, yes, the sisters are, and the friars and the monks, we elect our superiors, and we unelect them. Well, the abbots stay in forever. The Benedictines are more hierarchical because they come from that early period. But at any rate, we elect a new provincial every 6 years. We can re-elect him for 3 more years. He could be in as long as 9. But whenever we elect a new one, in my 25 years under this guy, he finds out if he can create a wedge between him and me. And he comes up with some ridiculous issue. The first one was some priest, when I have a wedding of a Hispanic couple, I always ask the mother of the bride, if she wants to, and if they're Hispanic, they always do, to make the tortillas to consecrate at the Mass, And it's just, that's the holy bread out here. And in fact, it's almost identical to the flatbread that Jesus would have used in his lifetime, so you wouldn't think it would need any rationale. I'm sure you've seen Catholic communion hosts. We used to say in the seminary, it takes more faith to believe it's bread than to believe it's Jesus. It takes more faith. Do you use that same stuff? You don't use that, no. You use real bread. No, it's like fish food. It's not bread. By any stretch of the imagination, it takes more faith to believe it's bread than to believe it's Jesus. But anyway, all right. So most of my masses, I just use bread, And so some priest saw me using these tortillas at this wedding, and he ran the next day, or reported called, Richard Rohr used consecrated tortillas. So he calls me up. Father Richard, this is Archbishop Sheehan. I got report that you consecrated tortillas at a wedding mass on Saturday. Is this true? That they bother with things like this? I said, yes, I did. I said, I've actually always done that when the mother of the bride or the groom would like to make them. It's a sacred bread, as you know. And these were the first words out of his mouth. Now, this sounds like the scribes and Pharisees. He said, was there salt or baking soda used? I couldn't believe such a stupid. I said, well, I can check with the bride. And I had to bite my tongue, I wanted to say, does Jesus have anything against salt and baking soda or something? But I didn't say it. And he said, this is not the legitimate. I would have reason to question the validity of the Eucharist. Like Jesus doesn't come if it's not the authentic. So I realized, he was at level 3. There was no point. I said, are you saying you don't want me to do that? And he said, absolutely not. He says, I have questioned that it was even a valid mass. I said, in your diocese, I will never consecrate tortillas again. I can please him that way if that makes him happy. I do it when I go to other places, but he only has control over me in this little area. This is the non-dual way you survive as a Catholic. You offer these guys incense. Okay, that's fine. Then, the next provincial, Father Larry, he always would stop him in the sacristy when they were vesting for a confirmation or something like that, and bring up Richard. And I don't even know all the things, but he said after the second time he brought you up at his sacrament, he said, Archbishop, we are here for a confirmation. Unless you have a serious, substantial, real theological issue with Richard Rohr, you may never mention him in my presence again. Do you understand? See, provincials, while they're provincials, are the equals of bishops. So a bishop can't talk down to him. And so we encourage, listen, while you're in office, you give it to him. Because no one else, everybody else is bowing and scraping, as Catholics do, around bishops. So he did, and he never brought my name up again. But the third one's the best, Father Gino, who's now our provincial. He's Hispanic, he's bright, he's funny, he's a 2 on the Enneagram. Loving man, very loving man. But a real sharp sense of humor, real quick. So the secretary, Brother Dwayne, was sitting there when this call happened. So Dwayne told me the word-for-word account. Calls, he says, Father Gino, clears his voice, his throat a few times, and he says, is your office getting the same complaints our office, that's called officious language, about Richard Rohr's preaching, that we're consistently getting complaints about Father Richard's preaching? And without skipping a beat, Brother Dwayne told me, Gino said, the provincial. He said, actually, I get more complaints about yours than I do his. He said that. He's never brought, and since then, he never, but 3 different provincials he tried, So forgive the long answer to your good question. So I got exonerated at the Vatican level. Now, it could happen any time. And I've told them if they really would want to make a case, I would just take a leave of absence rather than go through years of trying to prove it or fight it or something like that. And I hope that doesn't happen. I really do. But as of now, as of today, I'm in good standing. It's amazing. Now, part of it is, remember I told you my early CDs came out in my first set in 73, The Great Themes of Scripture. And a lot of the guys who are bishops now used to listen to them. They've told me that. So now I'm not politically correct, but in the 70s I was politically correct. It was a different Catholic Church then. So I think a lot of them have a love-hate relationship with me. And the love, thank God, has protected me. That, like one in Connecticut told me, he said, Richard, I could never invite you to my diocese because the young priests would not come. And they would really assault me for inviting you. So forgive me, I'd love to have you, but it wouldn't work. You'd divide the diocese. So it's very different. And when I was in the seminary, we made fun of the old priests. Do you understand? Now it's the young priests. Just the opposite. The young priests are unbelievably right-wing. I can't even relate to them. I can't. It's level 2 and level 3, but a viciousness about it that is, I don't know where that came from. Because we were conservative when we were kids in Kansas. But it was a kind, sweet conservatism. It was just like sort of Amish people, just be nice to everybody, but not a broad thinking. But now there's a feistiness to it, a desire to humiliate you. Sort of like our politics, sort of like Democrats and Republicans. And maybe your church is sharing some of that too, I don't know. But where did that come from? Being nasty for Jesus. That's what it feels like. 15 minutes, what else would be good? No point, I got to save the Cosmic Christ now for the morning, where we can open the whole thing up and draw it together too, I hope. But anything else that might be worth unpackaging while we have the time?
This kind of goes back to true self, false self.
Okay, yeah.
Would you talk a little bit about welcoming prayer as a way to kind of break out of that invitation to go back to the false self and instead head toward the true self?
That's a really good pastoral suggestion. Are you all familiar with the welcoming prayer? I don't have the whole schema written out in front of me, but it's teaching you when something you want to resist or oppose or fight or deny or reject, use any of those verbs. teaching you actually, or just suffering, how to actually offer a prayer where, God, I invite this in, whatever it has to teach me. Wow, it takes heroic effort to do it. When you've just been humiliated or talked about or made fun of, or you got a hate letter. Is that the way you understand the welcoming prayer?
Indeed. That's part of why I asked the question, is because I'm wondering, maybe there's a couple levels to it. Is that something you practice? And then, what recommendations we want to move toward true self?
I have used the welcoming prayer as a deliberate choice several times when I could not get out of fear or feelings of deep resentment toward a person who'd hurt me or I knew was talking about me or saying false things about me. And you find your mind just replaying it over and over again and trying to defend yourself in your mind. God, those things become lethal, as you know. So that's where I found the welcoming prayer, that when you stop that which you resist persists. You've all heard that. The 12 steppers use that. I think it's a brilliant line. That which you resist persists. The welcoming prayer helps you to stop the energy of resistance and to discover a different energy. In fact, okay, I'm not going to fight it. It's really worked for me on several occasions, if I can speak of working, where I just said, listen, nothing worse can happen than I'd lose my reputation here. What part of me wants my reputation? That's my false self. So I faced the worst already, and I'm saying yes to it. Boy, the relief that comes with accepting, welcoming the worst, and saying it will not kill me. It can't kill me. It's already killed me symbolically. I find it very effective. Yeah. And I know I've used it at times where I knew no other way out of my feelings. You know, maybe after the Enneagram tapes themselves, I think in the last 5 years at least, my biggest selling tape is that single CD, Emotional Sobriety. And I don't know what I said on it, but I must have been enlightened that day because people just love it. You know? And I know one of the things I surely would have said is that I find a vast majority of us are undone by our emotions. It's a far worse demon than, well, you think it's all lust when you're a young man anyway. And of course there can be the emotions associated with lust too. But just emotions lead people to really do stupid things, overreact, say things that they're sorry for years later, ruin relationships. Who of us haven't hurt another person by some damn stupid, overreactive, egocentric? It's almost always self-referential, and you overstate your case. The phrase emotional sobriety came from Bill Wilson. It's in the big book, and he says something, maybe some of you know the exact quote better than I, but until you've achieved emotional sobriety, he says you may not consider yourself in recovery or sober. You might have stopped drinking, but until your emotions stop going up and down, up and down, up and down, according to who likes you and who doesn't like you, which is what it comes down to. Did you realize how we let ourselves be jerked around by whether people like us or don't like us, or whether we like them or don't like them? And you think the things I was emotional about last Tuesday, I don't even remember what they were anymore. It's why the Buddhists will call emotions emptiness. It's absolute emptiness. So if that's at all an issue, I'm happy to recommend that single CD to you. people really, for some reason, like it. I must have said it right on there. I don't remember what all I said, but it's in that direction. And then offering contemplation or centering prayer as a way to disidentify with your emotions. I might have even talked about the welcoming prayer. I don't know that I did, though, on that particular CD. But yeah, it's brilliant. It's because what you're doing is reversing engines. And if you just remember what I said, you know it already. That which you resist persists. That's what it's based on that principle. Stop resisting. Don't think of an elephant. Doesn't work. It just doesn't work. When you start, I want to stop obsessing about what she said to me yesterday. And I've got to win the argument next time I see her and prove how wrong she was, how stupid she was. Oh, God, it's such a waste of time, you know. Whereas if you can just seek peace, and exactly as the gospel says, the Spirit will tell you what to say in the moment. And don't plan ahead of time what you are to say. This endless rehearsing in the mind of a difficult conversation that you're going to have. If you can just seek peace, and I know at times after the welcoming prayer, what came to me is, Richard, just say the absolute truth. Don't seek to win the conversation. Don't seek to humiliate your opponent. Don't seek to defend yourself and prove why you were right and he was wrong. Just speak the truth. And the truth of yourself, too. No need to humiliate that other person. And boy, has that worked for me when I can do that. I can begin by owning. Like the last time this was really, I said to the party, it was a staff person here, I realize I have really not, I've been unfair to you and unjust to you because I've never stated to you what I need in this context. I never have. And that's my fault. That's not your fault. And that was true. That was just true. It's not your fault that I haven't told you what I need in this. Then when you don't meet the need, I come along and get upset. That's my problem. Understand? And this woman, you could already see her immediately just soften. Because I own it as my problem. I just spoke honestly from my heart, and it just really helped, you know. Really turned it around. Whereas for a while my mind had just been creating the conversation whereby I could prove that she was wrong, that she didn't meet my needs, and she was a cruel, selfish human being. And that's the way my mind was going, which was so stupid. Really stupid. All false self. So a good thing to ask yourself when you are playing those mind games, when you're not emotionally sober, is what part of me is angry? Or what part of me is offended? And you really can't offend the true self very easily. You can't. It's always the false self that takes offense. As Paul says, love does not take offense. The true self is not offended. It might say a value was offended or God's goodness was offended, but it's always my false self that's offended. The Richard part of me that deserves respect because I founded this organization, or the Richard person who wrote books and deserves to be considered as a wisdom figure. Oh, that crap is what gets me in trouble because, you know, like you believe your PR after a while. You really do. Yes. Nice.
Granted, the true self can't be offended, but I believe or can be wounded.
Yeah. Okay, let's play with. Can the true self be wounded? Here's the way you can tell whether it's the true self. If it's a knee-jerk, well, if you can't let go of it, it's almost always your false self. There might be an initial, ooh, you know, you made fun of Jesus or something. I wish you wouldn't talk about Jesus that way. He's my, teacher and Lord. But the very fact that it's still chafing 5 hours later, you're not offended for Jesus. You're offended for yourself.
I'm trying to get away from offended. I mean, like, truly.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I need an example. Yeah. What would be one?
I hate to go back to hurting Venus.
She knows her name. When you say it, she looks at you.
There's things of injustice.
Okay.
I think it's like even someone, and that's why I go to someone else other than yourself. Go that hurts. That just and it's noting that we've talked about that. I hate to say I agree. I can't find anything wrong with suffering anymore. That it's a good thing that yourself being wounded, because that's such a reason to a higher level of consciousness and reality. But I'd still say that's
okay. You're helping me. Let's say what's been killing me for weeks are these poor women and children in refugee camps in Syria. You see these pictures of kids walking around in the snow. Oh, God. How are we letting that happen? These poor little things driven out of their country by their own government, living and they think it's going to be up to 1 million soon. So I guess you're making us say something important. Your true self should be wounded by that. Yes. Damn it. That's not right. How does he get away with that? And how are we letting him? I'm not saying we should invade Syria or anything, but yes, it is your true self. Precisely because it's not any skin off your or my back. Right now, little kids in Syria are maybe walking in the snow without shoes. Get it dissociated from the self, I guess. And there we can feel a wounding as a member of the body of Christ, that human beings are suffering this right now. That should hurt us. Thank you.
But to take it even a little closer to home, what about that feel? What about your own emotion? So, because I'm imagining Jesus. So, Jesus frustrated with his disciples for pornography. I mean, he didn't name that frustration. He's so sad, So here he is experiencing this full range of emotions, and I don't want to say, well, that's Jesus' false self stuff.
No. There you go. That's another good example.
So might it be that, or just, Jerusalem, he's like ready to give them so much. And he said, I would gather you to my arms, a mother, but you wouldn't have it, and his heart is breaking. That doesn't feel like a false self.
It sure doesn't.
But it's him.
But it is his human, divine complexus feeling that, and which we would believe is his true self. Thank you. This is an important addition to the conversation.
People I work with end up really having difficulty with the problem of evil. And will distrust divine goodness because of it.
Yes.
Not just on an intellectual level, but on an affective level. And I'm wondering how integration can be pursued about those questions.
People who...
Even if they're not offended, it might be the refugees in Syria. Like, see, this proves that we're screwed. God's not here for us.
God is,
And this, I'm telling you, silence by Scotistic. And it just really...
What was that?
The book we were talking about yesterday.
Silence. Endo.
Because it's about, he deals with the silence of the martyrs. Like, where are you, God? God, these people are dying for you, representing you. Why aren't you stopped? And just the complexity in that. And yet, I can ruin the end, but just right every day, every week. That's good. All right.
I better draw to a close just so you have a little break. I see Matthew out there. But let's not be afraid if there's some remaining things, or even over our beer and barbecue tonight, we can talk a little more. Why don't you take a standing break? Matt will be coming in. Okay, Matt, we're going to be with you. The postscript of this book is on the theodicy question.
Oh, okay.
If that's open at all. Sure. And I entitled it, Only a Suffering God Can Save Us. All right. Well, Matt, they're all yours. Okay. All right, we're going to go.
We'll see you back here at 5:30.
5:30. Well, I won't go home.
Oh, okay.
Here in my office.
All right. Okay, are you going to head out? Okay. Got it. Thanks. Does anyone else need to go off-site to grab someone that you're bringing to the function tonight? Okay.
She may. My wife's, talked to Paul. She was,
Oh, good.
My wife may be coming. She texted me. She's been in Santa Fe. But she comes, she'll be with me a little bit.
Okay.
So,
Great.
connected my good duck. And that's it. Let's see, we should go there. Pull up. Where? See what I'm saying? Oh, okay. And day with him for me. Just a little bit. It's one of those. TrinityGraceChurch.com. Hey, I'll just loop you in with Doug. Yeah, please.
My sense about how the day has progressed for you guys today has been outside of the trip that you took back to the gardens this afternoon. Has there been much silent time for today's format that you guys can recall?
Just the beginning this morning.
Just the very beginning?
Yeah.
For just the opening contemplative set?
Yeah,
Right.
we walked to the place, Walled Garden.
Okay. Well, what we'd like to encourage you to do then, especially because we've got some good letting the hair down, relaxing to look forward to at 5:30's dinner, is if we could ask each of you to, if you want to stay in this room, great. If you want to fan out across the property here, or go down to the walking labyrinth or the chapel, I presume by now everyone's had a chance to see where that's at and how that's laid out, is to take the next, I would say, 30 to 40 minutes just to be by yourself and allow the day to kind of be with you that way. And then we can look forward to kind of reconnecting. And if there's more stuff that's bubbling up as far as questions for which that we can tackle over beers and some barbecue, we can absolutely do that, or none of it, whatever you guys feel inclined to do. But how does that approach sound for the next half hour or so? And then what we'll do is we'll get things set up while you guys are doing that. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you guys do decide to hang closer back this way, just try to be mindful of anyone else's desire to be present to that silence in the meantime.